You watch how many shows a season? Let's talk about that. What's up guys, it's your boy, and today's topic is seasonal anime, and specifically how many you watch per season and how exactly you get that done and whether it's worth it or not, and kind of my personal perspective on the seasonal grind. So, before I get into it really quickly, as usual, go ahead and like and subscribe on the video if you haven't already done so, and let's get straight into the topic. Seasonal anime, as I've already mentioned, which I don't really watch enough, but let's say for a moment that I did. What would be the pros and the cons of watching every single anime to come out in a single season? Now, I realize that most people, even people who keep up with a lot of seasonal shows, don't typically watch every single one. But for the sake of argument here, I do want to kind of talk about what it would be like to watch every single show in a season, because typically there's 4 seasons of shows: spring, summer, fall, winter, exactly what you'd expect. And they all come with, let's just say 25 to 30 shows. I may be a little off, sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less, but let's say it's roughly that number of anime, right? What are the pros of watching every single one of those in a season? Well, first off, something that I've realized about the anime community as I've kind of gotten into it is that they are very kind of reactionary to things as they happen. And that is to say that if you miss something that's going on currently, you've missed it and it's not really worth talking about anymore. Something that I kind of would like to make a video on at some point would be My Dress Up Darling. But My Dress Up Darling came out in spring. Past that, you've had Mob Psycho 100, you've had Spy Family, you've had Chainsaw Man, you've had Bleach. There's just so many other great shows that have come out since My Dress Up Darling, which was spring of 2022. So, in terms of like having kind of a FOMO about things, fear of missing out, you wouldn't want to miss the big shows, because if you miss the big shows, then you can't talk about the big shows in big public forums. And I think that that's a completely understandable fear, especially as somebody like myself who reviews anime. I like to make videos about things in anime that I enjoy. For instance, I made videos on Jahi and Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, a few others that all did decently well, but at the same time, if I would have talked about Jahi or Bunny Girl Senpai right after they came out, I guarantee you they would have probably 25 to 50% more views than they do right now, but they've kind of had their time in the limelight, and their fandoms have become a little bit more niche as less and less content has been made surrounding those properties. So you kind of want to watch these shows as they're coming out, because if you don't, you're going to miss the community that kind of rallies behind that show as it comes out. But that also comes with the flip side, and that flip side is hidden gems. Every single season I see one. I see a show that I think is going to be good and doesn't have a lot of press, but ends up kind of blowing up. I think the one that I've seen the most came out this past season in the winter, or the fall season rather, of 2022, and that is Bocce the Rock. Bocce the Rock is a pretty typical slice of life show by Cloverworks, Studio Cloverworks, and it blew up in popularity. And it's just about a few girls who are in a band together, but there's just so much more to it than that. The animation is just unlike anything the anime world's really seen, in just how kind of exaggerated and over the top it is in the expressions of the characters. When something happens and there is a reaction to it, it's not just going to be like a scream or a yelp or some like goofy little animation. They're going to go into a 3D dimension just to portray how embarrassing this reaction is. It's really, really cool, and it's really well done. But if you're not keeping up with that, once again, you're going to have that fear of missing out, but you've got to find the hidden gems, and that's really one of the pros of being a seasonal anime watcher, is you can find those as they're coming out. If you have to watch it the following season, now you know it's a hidden gem, which is really good, but once again, you weren't there at kind of the inception of the hidden gem. You weren't there when it started coming out, nobody knew about it, it was underground, and you could kind of grow with the fandom from square one. It's really interesting. I mean, I recently went to Japan and I bought some volumes of Bocce the Rock. They had a like front display in a store called Animate. And Animate is one of the premier like anime entertainment stores in Japan. Bocce the Rock's huge, but if you would have asked people a few months ago who had not read the manga what Bocce the Rock is, I guarantee you most anime fans would say, I've heard of it, or maybe I'm familiar with it, or maybe I've not heard of it at all. And now it's kind of, if you're in the anime sphere and you keep track of things, it's brought itself to the forefront very, very quickly. And it's, to be fair, it is backed by a really good studio in Cloverworks, and I hope to continue to see it succeed as it goes forward. And that is all to say, there's no shortage of content either. If you have 20 or 30 shows to watch, there's going to be both good and bad, and you're gonna have a lot of stuff to watch during that time. You know, even services like Netflix that have a bunch of shows, I mean, monthly you might get a few, but a lot of people kind of binge through Netflix shows like that, and I know that a lot of kind of hardcore Netflix people complain about the fact that there's not a lot to watch. And I don't feel like that's ever the case with anime watchers. They may say that there's not as many good shows in a season. That may be true, but there are things out there to watch. And that's tends to always be the case. But let's talk about some of those bad shows for a little bit as we go into kind of the negatives, at least in my view, of watching seasonal anime. But before we get into the bad shows in particular, I do want to start with the weekly wait. Copyright, trademarked, patent. I came up with the idea. The weekly wait, which is essentially, you know how all of your favorite shows release on Friday and Saturday, and every single week you have to wait for Friday and Saturday for those 5 good shows that have the good episodes, and you have the rest of the week to watch all the bad ones. That's because when you have a show that's actively coming out and you're keeping up with the seasonal grind, typically that's kind of the best part of the week, is those couple days when you actually have the shows you like coming out, but the rest of the time, you're sitting and waiting for those shows to come out. I know that specifically Jojo fans had, I believe it was Jojo Fridays. They'd correct me if I was wrong there, but it was the day that Crunchyroll released the new episodes of JoJo's onto Crunchyroll for people to watch. So they gave it their own dubbed title of JoJo, as I said, I think it's JoJo Fridays when it would come out. And then Netflix came in and they ruined the whole thing. I've got a video about that if you want to learn more about how JoJo's was kind of messed up by Netflix a little bit. But that also applies to continuing shows as well. So if you're not necessarily keeping up with the seasonal grind, but you're a One Piece fan, which, by the way, if you are caught up in One Piece, major respect to you. I cannot do it. I don't know if I'll ever watch One Piece, as great as it may be, just because of how long the backlog of episodes is. But the problem with that is you gotta wait a week for each new episode of One Piece. So unless you want to start from the top and watch One Piece all over again, now you're just sitting with one episode of One Piece every single week. And that's not a lot, especially when you factor in things like the opening and ending, along with a recap of the episode. You get like 10 minutes of One Piece every week. So that is kind of a struggle, and probably the main struggle, at least in the people that I've kind of talked to about seasonal anime that I've seen, is this idea that you have to wait for the next few episodes. But there are also the stinkers. If you're going to do the whole seasonal grind, if you're going to watch every single show in a season, you're going to have some shows that are not good. I could definitely bring this up with something like X-Arm, which was more than a fail. I think it's the lowest rated show on my anime list, and it basically had a team of people who had no idea what they were doing, and it was just another seasonal anime, and it was a failure. But I think if you want to really look at what a true failure in the sphere of anime is, look up X-Arm. But you'll see some shows that are maybe even just not terrible, but just mid in general. I remember I watched 2 seasonal shows a couple years ago, I want to say it was. And the 2 shows that I was watching at the time were Don't Toy With Me, Nagatoro, and the other one was Dropout Idol Fruit Tart. Dropout Idol Fruit Tart was an idol show, and I had never seen an idol show at the time, and it was the most mid show I've ever seen. And there's a reason you will not see people talking about Dropout Idol Fruit Tart anywhere. It's a really bizarre premise in terms of the agency they work for. They all live in a house together for, I believe the production house is literally called Rat Productions. So it's just one of those that it's not bad per se, but it's just there's probably 20 other idol shows from prior seasons that are better than the one that I'm currently watching right now. But if you want to keep up with the seasonal grind, you gotta put through with a couple stinkers in there along the way. But again, that assumes that you're going to watch every single one, and I'll get to kind of my model for how I do things in just a second, but I want to talk about one other key thing that can make the seasonal grind difficult, and that is sunk cost. And you might be wondering, what the heck is sunk cost? Why are we in business terms now? I am an accounting major. Let me have this. Sunk cost is you are putting your time into something, and so you can't put it into something else because it's in one thing. Am I telling you to go outside? No. However, if you are spending your time watching bad anime for the current season, you're using that time where you could be watching good anime from a prior season that you haven't seen before. So in watching Dropout Idol Fruit Tart, I was denying myself seeing, at the time, something like Steins Gate, which was from a prior season, but is significantly better overall than Dropout Idol Fruit Tart. You have that kind of sunk cost idea where if you're watching a bad show, is it really worth it to put in the seasonal grind time? Last time I'm going to say this, but that once again assumes that you're going to watch every single show in a season. And I realize that's not the case for most of you, and that's going to bring it into how I watch anime, because believe it or not, for as many videos as I make about anime, and as much as I really like anime, I don't watch a lot of anime. I love it, don't get me wrong, and I try to watch anime, but I make YouTube videos, I do Twitch streams, and I'm a full-time college student. I don't have any free time, hardly. So I usually just try to watch a single show at a time, just one. And that will typically get me along to come up with some new topics and to have some other ideas in that regard. So I tend to watch ones that, first off, I know that I'm going to enjoy. For instance, when new Jojo's episodes came out, the show that I watched was Jojo's, because I had watched a bunch of other episodes of Jojo's, I knew that I liked the show, and I knew that I wanted to keep kept up. And that did help me with some research for videos, especially when Netflix got a hold of it. But in general, even with the whole Netflix debacle, I still enjoyed the show. So I watched it. And then there's also slice of life shows that I particularly found interest in, like Jahi. The Great Jahi Will Not Be Defeated is a slice of life show about a girl who wants to go back to the Dark Realm, which is like a demon realm thing, but she gets caught in the real world and it's not treating her very nicely. So those are just premises that I find enjoyable. But I do try to find ones that would be particularly interesting from a review perspective as well. Something like A Silent Voice was a really good example of this. Now, A Silent Voice in particular, I was invited to go see when it went to a cinema, and I loved the movie. It was so good. But I also just had this feeling with all the hype behind it that it would be one that I would be able to resonate with and talk about, and that's what I did, as I found it for a review. But I don't find everything for a review. I typically just find things that I enjoy, and then they happen to be reviewable. There are a few separate cases, and I'm going to talk about one in particular, and that is Fairy Tail. Now, if you keep up with my Discord at all, you know that I, for the past probably 10 months, watched the first season of Fairy Tail. That was the one anime that I watched, aside from I caught up on Jojo's episodes and watched Summertime Rendering when I was in Japan. That's it. The rest of it was all Fairy Tail. And let me tell you, that was a grind. And I'll talk more about it some other time. But in general, I had heard that some people really like Fairy Tail, and other people absolutely cannot stand Fairy Tail to the core of their very being. And so me, being the person that I am, was like, that sounds interesting that some people love it and some people just absolutely despise it, so we're going to give it a watch. And I did. And I have opinions on it, but I'm going to save them for later. But I do try to find ones that may have some controversy in some way in terms of fandom, because I want to see what it's about, right? I want to see why some people like it and why some people think that it has a lot of flaws. And I'll tell you this, I think Fairy Tail has a lot of good things, and I think that it has some bad things as well. But in general, I don't try to just watch any certain genre. I try to watch things that I think will have a good point for me, and that typically involves a lot of classics. Evangelion, Your Lie in April, Fairy Tail, whatever it may be, it typically has some significance behind it, because I'm trying to catch up on a lot of the shows that most people have already seen and really enjoy, and try to add new perspective to it. Or, in the case of Blend S, I watch it for the memes. That's right, the first anime that I ever watched to get me into anime as a whole was Blend S, and I totally just watched it because I saw the intro sequence with Snoop Dogg, and I was like, I gotta see what this is about. But seasonal anime in general, I wouldn't say it's worth watching every single one as you go through, but certainly, if you think there's a few that you would enjoy, why not? Especially if you have the time. I typically just do not, but I respect watching them, and if I had the time, I certainly will. That's about all I've got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this little video. Once again, you can click the like button and subscribe button. If you're feeling a little crazy, you can also click the notification bell too. I have been Jelswick, and I'll see you next time.